Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Salima Rice. I'm actually a fifth generation CDAO and 21 years in this, and I'm the founder and CEO of CDO today, and I am your track producer for track C, along with Eddie and Jonathan. And in this session, you're going to hear about the CDO's guide to implementing GenAI and analytics and accelerating time to value. So before I hand things over, I want to say a few housekeeping things. This session is being recorded, and presentations will be included in the symposium proceedings. The video recordings will be uploaded to the CDOIQ YouTube channel in about 3 months after the symposium. There is going to be a Q&A session at the end, so please submit your questions via the Whova app, just in case we don't get to them all. And with that, I'm going to turn this session over to Kaycee Lai, who is the founder and CEO of Promethium. And Kaycee, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Salima. How's everyone doing today? So far, so good? Got your coffee in? All right. So you know, the unfortunate thing of me presenting in Boston is that I have an investor who's based in Boston. And he actually shows up to my events. So the good news for you guys is he keeps me honest. So like everything I actually say has to be real. Or he shows up at my board meetings and say, hey, well, I remember I was at that meeting and you said you can do this. So say hi to Graham Brooks back there, 406 Ventures. Graham, say hello. All right. This guy cut me the second check, so I'm very happy, very grateful for him, right? It's for us to be able to build Promethium. So thank you guys for coming. So a little bit about me. So I've been in the data analytics and infrastructure space for over 20 years. I'm at the age where I don't like to say over 30 or close to 30, so I like to keep it under. I'm rounding down. That's what happens now. You know, when you're younger, you like to round up. Now I'm at a point where I actually have to round down. But I've been at places like Dell, EMC, VMware, and data companies like Delphix. Most recently, I was at Waterline Data, which is a data catalog company. It's recently sold to Hitachi Vantara. And 6 years ago, I decided that it was a great idea to quit my job while my wife was 3 months pregnant with our first child, while I was doing renovations, to start a company called Promethium. And for 4 years, everyone said I was crazy, that nobody needed this. But it's great to see kind of the adoption in data fabric as well as kind of being fueled by GenAI. So I'm very happy to kind of share with you guys what we've been up to. So I guess the question you guys are all in here is thinking about trying to adopt GenAI, right, into your environment. And so most people would just say, well, how bad can it be? Can't I just throw some LLMs at my data warehouse or database and call it a day? What we're going to talk about today is it's actually a lot more than that. There's a lot more you need to do because you got to figure out, in most enterprises, you probably have more than one database. You might even have more than one data warehouse. You might even have more than one data lake. And there's a lot of things that the LM has to go figure out, like, well, which one do I pick? Which one is the right one? How do I know this is actually accurate? And if I have to build something, do I take it from one source? Do I take it from multiple sources? And which one do I take? And I think that's what is really, really challenging when you're talking about enterprise analytics. So this was actually a poll that actually Gartner did recently, surveying folks in terms of what are the top implementation challenges for GenAI. So you notice at the very bottom, right, it's not hard to find value-add use cases. That's not the problem, right? The problem is really, you know, the top three, right? I think most of us who have tried GenAI probably know this. How do you know that the data is right? Actually, most of us, if you've tried GenAI solutions, probably have seen some crazy results from your LLMs, right? And you know it's wrong. But then how do you also ensure that the LLM works across all existing data sources, right? Not just the new ones, right? And then how do I make sure I don't expose my company to risk? Anyone here from the governance side of the house? All right. They're all kind of like, I'm not really sure I want people to know. But no, that's important, right? It's very, very important that you don't do that. So what we're going to be talking about are really just these three things today, because I only have 45 minutes. I'm sure if we have more time, we can talk, there are more challenges, but let's just focus on these three things because I think if you can get through these three things, the adoption of Gen AI in your environment is going to be a lot easier. If you can solve relevancy and accuracy, data integration is a big challenge, right? We're seeing a lot of data teams are now being converted into AI teams, right? And there's a big overlap because to make AI accurate, there's a huge data integration problem, right? And then security and governance as well, as we just talked about. So why is it so hard? Let's talk about the accuracy and relevancy. And this is where I think data teams don't get enough appreciation, right? If it was easy as, let me just access Snowflake and I'm done, right? There wouldn't be a need for data teams. Data teams do a lot. Like, here's an example of a workflow where, if you're in the data team, someone comes to you and asks you a question, and it doesn't exist. That magical table doesn't exist yet. What do? You got to go figure out where it is, figure out who has access, how you can get access. Maybe someone needs to build a pipeline because you don't want to disturb and disrupt the existing pipelines. Move it to your data warehouse, data lake, transform it, build a data set, write the query so that you can actually consume it and then give it to someone. And then they're going to tell you it's wrong. That's not the right data. And you go back and forth. Now, to make things worse, you probably don't have one tool that you use. There's probably several tools that you're using in this process, so you're hopping out of multiple UIs. You're spending a lot of money and time on the integration, and it's not one persona, right? Several different people, data engineers, data analysts, analytics engineer, business users, and sometimes you realize it's wrong, so you're going back to different steps. This is what we do today. So, do you think the LLM can figure this out of the box? Probably not, right? This is one of the reasons why the accuracy and relevancy is hard, because this is what we do today to ensure accuracy and relevancy. Second challenge, data sprawl will continue. I love my friends at Snowflake and Databricks. Not all your data is going to exist on Snowflake and Databricks, right? There's always going to be a better database, always going to be a cheaper data lake, always going to be a more scalable data warehouse. Marketing will always find some cool SaaS application they want you to connect to, right? So the thing in the middle is an infinite sign. It's going to keep going on forever, right? And so why is that a challenge? Well, it's a challenge because what you have today is going to become legacy very, very soon. And a lot of enterprises already have legacy tech, and they have to support legacy tech, right? I'm old enough to remember when Salesforce started, but Salesforce is kind of legacy now, right? And so very quickly this happens, and so you have to figure out how to deal with legacy products. And a lot of the legacy products, it's tough because they were built pre-AI, even pre-cloud. A lot of them don't have APIs. A lot of them have their own custom logic that you got to deal with, right? So all these sources are going to be tricky, and then they're not in one place. That's the other thing, right? Especially if your company grows, you make mergers and acquisitions, take data from different sources, locations, et cetera. It makes it really tough. So what do people do today, right? Vendors have started incorporating LLMs into their solution today, right? You get Snowflake, you get their own LLM. You get Azure Data Lake, you have their own LLM. Databricks has their own. And they're all awesome by itself. The problem is if you isolate them, so if you want data from Snowflake, you're using Snowflake's LLM. If you want data from Databricks, you go in there. Each LLM is now trained on different data. The prompts might be different. And now the user has to know, okay, for this knowledge, for this set of data, I have to go here. And then the data is not in real time, because not all the data is in one place either. So that approach also becomes challenging, right? We see a lot of environments we go into, and they do have multiple databases and data warehouse and data lakes. And so having multiple LLMs actually could be a thing that actually makes things difficult now. So if you try to rely on that, that can also compromise the accuracy and the context. And then data privacy and protection, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Two ways most people do it today. One is if you want to do the public LLM, like ChatGPT, OpenAI. You can send data to ChatGPT and OpenAI, no bueno, right? Or again, kind of what we talked about, you buy a data warehouse or data lake that has its own LLM, and now you have multiple LLMs that you're dealing with, but you also have to give all the data in the data warehouse and data lake to that LLM. So one way or another, there is some level of exposure, right? And you have to make sure that all the access controls are going to be there. And the access controls has to be consistent and uniform across the whole enterprise. You can't say, well, for Databricks, I have this access control. For Snowflake, I have this one. For Azure, I have this one. That would be really hard to govern. So how do you actually have a centralized governance scheme for all of your data, right, across the environment if you're going to think about using GenAI across the environment? So why the heck is this so hard? I just went through all these challenges, right? The reason why it's become so hard is because GenAI has started ushering in and pushing these changes now that we weren't used to operating before, right? The SLA has changed. Before, as data practitioners, we had time. You have a new request, I need to build a new pipeline, I need to go find, I've got time, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. If it's wrong, maybe we'll work on it, I'll get back to you in a month or two. Everyone's used to that instantaneous, right, response and output now, so that's difficult. Two is, the persona has changed. Before, we had very strict segregation of roles. If you're a data guy, you do this. If you're a business person, don't mess around with SQL. Don't even look at it. You can't do that. Well, now with things like LLMs and GenAI, it goes through and lets the business person generate SQL and execute SQL. So what it started to do is introduce a new workflow, if you think about it. Our old workflows are kind of being challenged, right, with GenAI. It's now a single user workflow that you have to think about. And so this is what's putting a lot of pressure and a lot of complexity on the modern data stack that we have. Actually, the irony is what we used to call the modern data stack is not an ideal data stack. It's now an outdated data stack when it comes to the age of AI. So I hope I didn't depress everyone by telling you how awful it is, how difficult it is, and you'll never get it going. But I think these are the most common things that we see over and over again. And what we see is a lot of people try these things, and they ran into obstacles. So bringing them up so that way, hopefully, you guys get visibility and think about, OK, if I'm going to do this, I might want to avoid this. But there's hope. There's a way. So one of the things that a data fabric does, right, and Promethium has an AI-powered data fabric, is that it lets you connect to all your sources in real time and presents a single view to the LLM without moving the data to the LLM. Okay? So you get a real-time access. You don't have to send all your data to the LLM. But it also gives you relevant context because the data fabric knows what the business context is. It has the semantic layer. It has the catalog. It has the history of what people are doing. It has role-based access, fine-grained access control. So it becomes a very easy and natural, almost plug-in for GenAI and for LLMs for that specific reason. For those who don't know what a data fabric is, basically a data fabric is really this new approach, this new architectural approach that it's kind of challenging the existing or the previous data management architecture, right? Which is really a build to suit, right? We're all used to building a separate architecture or a separate implementation for a separate use case, a separate application. What Data Fabric is more, well, take what you have and then we can leverage what you have and then apply it for all the different use cases that you have. And so what Promethium is offering is a data fabric for allowing you to take advantage of all the metadata as well as all the data that you have in your environment and what you're doing, and allow you to quickly build either manually or with GenAI. And the reason why that's possible is because a data fabric has to have all these components. It can't be metadata only. It needs metadata, that's important, but it also has to have the data integration. So you also have to know and be able to connect to all the different data sources so that you can support legacy as well as new. The data has to be accessible, but you also need to be able to build, because that's the most important thing we love about LLM. Otherwise, it would be just a chatbot. You're just retrieving what you already have. But the LLM lets you build and create, so you need that data prep and delivery layer. And for AI to be functional and useful and accurate across all your environment, this is where the active metadata and the recommendation engine comes in, right? To be able to say, based on the metadata that we have, based on the metadata we're generating, how can we recommend and build for you and for you to validate? So This is why we were just recently named a cool vendor at, from Gartner, right, in the data management space, because with this layer and this foundation, it's very quick for you to actually adopt the data fabric to allow especially non-technical people to be able to experience the benefits of GenAI. Right? So let's look at it in a little bit more detail. We're all used to the left-hand side. We have our data sources, and we're going to create data, right? So the right-hand side, this is where data fabric gets interesting, is when you connect, you're actually not just doing more than just connecting. You're getting all the context, all the history, all the mapping of the relationships, as well as the ability to access the data logically without having to move the data. So that helps from a security perspective. And then you have like a studio or a factory to actually build. You can build manually, you can build AI assistants, or you can do full automation with GenAI, because now it has all your historical context. What's been used before, who likes it, or user rating reviews, crowdsourcing, and all the metadata that you have. And then finally, you can publish it so that you can consume these data products. And based upon the consumption, based upon how people react to what you created, it further updates, right, the metadata to let you know, hey, this one you built wasn't so good. Maybe the next time someone asks for this, we don't recommend this one. Or maybe we should build it differently. And to do all that, the data fabric really needs to understand your language, your ontology, right, your semantic layer, so that it can actually generate things that are accurate. It needs to have and integrate with your existing role-based access and fine-grained access controls, right, so that it's secure, so that way the LLM doesn't violate any governance rules. And then finally, you should have a contract, right, a data contract, so that way you can make sure what you're building actually fits the spec. So this will help a lot with the experience when you're using GenAI. So how does this actually all work if I ask a question? That's what most people are used to with GenAI. It's a natural language prompt. So this is a typical architecture for Promethium. There's two sides. The box is in green. Right? On the left-hand side, the Promethium scope, that's where the metadata operations happen, the metadata gathering as well as the intelligence. And the right-hand side is the intelligent edge, and that does the data access, right? The reason why that separation is there, you notice data access never leaves your environment. Good stuff, right? All the query, all the data access happens within the customer's environment, and the LLM could be in the customer's environment as well, or in the cloud, it doesn't matter. So when I first ask a question, when the user asks the question, right, that's sent from a metadata perspective. Basically, the words and tokens are sent to Promethium. And then Promethium sends the question to the LLM. Now notice the difference. Promethium did not send the data to the LLM. So the LLM has no idea, tables, columns, schema, database name, et cetera. It just has a question and tokens. And from there, it can only recommend, well, this is how I would build it. For example, if you're looking for a SQL query. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because LLMs have been trained with large corpus so that way they're really good at like natural language expressions. So something like best-selling product, top-performing salesperson. They have so much knowledge to already figure that out, what that translation would be from a SQL perspective. You should leverage that. Or sometimes LLMs have like industry-specific things like SAP. Right? They already have that body of knowledge in that. So you can leverage that, and then that information is sent back to Promethium, where Promethium can take those tokens, search against the metadata index that it has from all the different data sources you already have. And from there, it will recommend, right, this is the retrieval, this is how we would build the actual SQL, and then the execution will happen back at the customer's environment. So notice with this, the LLM never ever sees the fully qualified names of the data. Doesn't know a table, doesn't know a data source, doesn't know what columns, doesn't even see the final output, the SQL query. So all it has is a name of a question. So this is why it's a very secure, but it's also a very lightweight method. And by talking to the data fabric actually has all the context from all the databases, data warehouse, data lakes you created, history of joins, even dashboards, Tableau, Power BI, basically the downstream consumption layer. So it's very, very comprehensive. What we've able to see this starting getting a lot of adoption in a lot of enterprises, especially is with organizations that may not have a massive data team, or I should say organizations where their demand for GenAI outweighs the size of their data team, right? And they need help, right? And so one of our customers, a Fortune 500 blood testing company, has been able to use Promethium to give them visibility across all their environments. So for example, if somebody says, hey, I want to know how much of this particular test was done. Well, the hard part of doing that is every test actually has a different code, even though it's the same test. If I go to Colorado, it's a different code. If I go to Los Angeles, it's a different code, right? And what do I mean by how well, how much, and so forth? So being able to answer these domain-specific questions for them easily, but being able to show them the data and show them how it's actually built and visualized for them in a matter of minutes. So this is where the transparency comes in. I'll talk about that a little bit later. You can't have a black box. I think your customers are now sophisticated enough, and also your data team is sophisticated enough. They're not going to trust the black box. Here you go. Raise your hands if you guys have tried LLMs from like Databricks, Snowflake, or any other solutions like that. Okay. Did a query successfully execute the first time you did it? Okay, you did. You're amazing. It failed like 30 times for me, so it could be me, right? So a lot of times is when you ask that question, unless you specify the schema, the table, right, then it's very well contained, right? But a lot of times if you say, I don't know, if you're a business user, like, I don't know what table, I don't know what schema, this is all I want to know. And if it's a domain-specific thing like claims, for example, how do you make that accurate, right? And so this is where we've started to see data fabric becoming sort of going hand in hand with GenAI. We'll share these slides later, but I would recommend folks checking out these research from Gartner that specifically call out why the LLM is such a good accelerator for GenAI, right? Being able to give you the best practices, giving you, if you look at kind of the title of the study, it's offloading the prompt engineering and providing enterprise context, right? Which is really key. If your LLM has all the enterprise context that your governance team has already spent years building, the ontology, for example, the history, what's good. Is this the right join, right? Yes, it's a valid join, but is it the right one? That really helps accelerate the accuracy of the output that you get. So one of the things that we do at Promethium is giving you a single view of all your data, right, without having to move the data. So that way you can see what you have, where it is, and being able to annotate it and being able to govern it. And so once it gives you that, you don't have to worry where it's from. So the user can actually now get context, not just from a single source, but from multiple sources, which is important because you want to address multiple users, right? And again, from a governance perspective, you don't have to worry about the data being sent over or being stored because it's all logical, right? Being an NLP-driven solution means it's very well suited for a prompt-based type of solution. So within Promethium, yes, you can write code if you want to, but to make LLMs and GenAI have a high range of adoptability for business users, right, you do have to support natural language. You do have to offer natural language interfaces where people can just type free form, right? And that's one of the things that we've been working on for many years before the whole GenAI rage, because we believe that's what's going to give the highest level of adoption and democratization of data. It allows non-technical people to be able to interface and access the data. Right? So this is a pattern that we've actually built where you can ask the question, generate the data set or the query, actually execute the query successfully, validate and show you how it was actually built, right? With or without the LLM. So this actually has the flexibility to turn on or off the LLMs. So some environments, some organizations, for example, want to get started without the LLMs first, and some say, hey, I'm okay, using LLMs, and then some say, I'm going to go kind of a little bit of best of both worlds. I'm going to use the LLMs, and I'm actually even going to give some sample data to the LLM, so that way I can be, even more accurate. You do have the ability to set all those all those settings in Promethium. Now, what I talked about earlier was that you can not only retrieve what's been built. So if you've got a perfectly curated data sets in your data warehouse with awesome semantics, tags, et cetera, the LLM talking to that is going to do a pretty good job, right, in terms of being able to build something. But what if the data is in more than one place? What if, in order to answer this question, I had to get data from Oracle, from Postgres, from Redshift? Because sales data might be in Oracle, right? Orders data might be in Redshift somewhere. And a lot of times these questions require data from multiple sources. The data fabric, because it already has a logical connection, allows the LLM to actually have awareness of where all the data is and has the logic to put it together, but also show you how it was put together. So this is where being transparent helps, right? We're all used to seeing this from a lineage perspective, right? Imagine getting instant lineage whenever you ask a question, so that you can validate, right? And then being able to see, okay, great, this is the query, how it was actually written, and here's why we picked what we picked, right? Here's why we believe this is a measure. Here's why we believe it's a dimension. Here's why we believe this table has the same name as 20 others, but we picked this one because it's been endorsed by your data stewards, right? Here's why we believe we picked this join key because it's been joined 300 times more than the other ones. So these are all the helpful human context that we're all used to doing today. But there's no way an LLM is going to know that out of the box just by talking to your data warehouse or data lake. But it doesn't have to. Right? The data fabric is going to have this information and provide that single API access to the LLM. Right? So another success story is one of our customers, Hostess, were able to leverage Promethium's data fabric for their complex SAP environment. Right? Being able to ask questions like, hey, where do I put this next batch of goods that's about to go into a truck? Anyone in supply chain here? Anyone? No, nobody's in supply chain. All right, never mind. But if you're in supply chain and you have to take physical goods and put on trucks, one of the things that's hard is you got to figure out which door is available, because if the door is not available or the door doesn't have a truck in front of it, you're basically wasting your time, right? And if you have perishable goods, that's even more important, right? So that's one challenge we're able to solve for them just by folks on the factory floor. We're not even talking about analysts, folks on the factory floor being able to do this. Also being able to help folks in finance figure out, hey, am I going to be late with this order? Am I going to have time with this order? Because if I'm late, Walmart's not going to be very happy, right? If Walmart's expecting 500,000 boxes of Twinkies and I show up with 400,000, they're not going to be happy, they're going to penalize me. So if I can find that out in real time, I can call Walmart and say, look, we're going to miss 100,000 boxes of Twinkies. I'm going to give you 200 boxes of Ding Dongs instead. Is that cool? Right? It's a lot easier to have those conversations now than afterwards. So giving you, this is where the real-time access comes in. So again, the fabric is designed for GenAI because it has all these elements, right, in a single solution where you have the visibility, the discovery, but the active metadata to help you automatically assemble and validate. I think that's the most important thing, is you can see, you can validate, you can even visualize very quickly. We're talking a couple of minutes, and then you can govern it, right? So this doesn't have to be a, oh my God, like this is the output, it's a black box, I don't know if it's right or wrong. You can actually see how it was done, and you can share and collaborate with other folks first before you determine whether or not you want to adopt and push this data product into production. And so what we're talking about here is if you're looking at a successful deployment of GenAI, right, in your environment, you really need to think about how the LLM and whatever GenAI tool you're using, how would it understand where the data comes from, right? Is it trustworthy? How it's actually being consumed is actually very important. A lot of times we're just very focusing on the lineage. Where does it come from? Where does it come from? I always like to say that how it's actually consumed is actually just as important. It might come from all very valid and accurate sources. If nobody looks at it, if nobody likes it, that's a very important data point. that you should also take into consideration. Historical joins and semantic models. Right? Many ways to join tables, as you guys know, right? What's the right one? What's the best one, right? This one's going to result in 8 billion inner joins, probably not a good idea, or this one's going to give me half the data that I need. These things are important for you to figure out. Frequency of use as well, right? That determines what you should select, what the LLM should select or prioritize over. And then knowing relevant domain, right? So if I'm in finance and I ask a question, does it make sense for me to get data back from marketing? Maybe, maybe not, right? I want to make sure that the LLM recognizes my role within the organization, and based upon the role-based access I have and who I am as a user, it's only going to provide the most relevant context for me. Right? And then last thing is the crowdsourcing, right? How people react, how people consume should be factored in, because that gives us an idea, right? If we're going to spend all this time tagging, rating, review, thumbs up, thumbs down, let's take that information so that we get smarter over time. That's it. That's all I have. I want to make sure we leave time for questions. But again, I'm sure there are many other problems that people run into. We're still early days when it comes to GenAI for the enterprise. And that's really what we're focusing on, right, is really talking about, from an enterprise analytics perspective, how do you get the accuracy, the relevance when you're actually delivering these data products from a GenAI perspective? Because I think as data leaders, one of the hardest things is you put a tool out and the feedback you get is, it's not right. It doesn't look right. It's not accurate, right? I don't trust this anymore. And it's very easy to get that with a lot of these solutions. And so we want to just help people understand where the possible pitfalls are and ways to navigate around them.
Great. I'm going to walk around. If you'll just give your name and the company you're with, please.
You can't ask tough questions. That's the only thing I have, all right?
So Ashish Bajpai from John Deere. First of all, a cool offering, an integrated tool suite. I hope your investor is listening to this.
Hey.
So a question. There's a lot of capabilities which are baked into this offering. You spoke about a lot of data management foundational capabilities, active metadata management, governance, security, access, lineage, all coming together. You also spoke about, and there are a lot of one-stop solutions, various marketplaces, unified data platform which are coming together. Mm-hmm. I believe user experience, best left to every individual organization to tackle, goes a long way. So yes. From that perspective, the capabilities of this platform, are they only accessible through your user interface or the portal, or are they also accessible through APIs so that I can choose to pick up certain capabilities, whichever way I would like to present it back in my organization?
Yeah, good question. So we believe in kind of an open concept in Promethium. So we built it so that way you can choose to consume within Promethium, or you can choose to consume through API. Everything we do is all exposable through APIs. So if you don't like our UI from a search and discovery perspective, it's okay. You don't like our UI from a query perspective, you don't like our UI from a data sharing perspective, everything can be exposed via APIs. The other part is it's a very extensible platform, right? So it's actually plug and play in the sense that if you already have a data catalog like Calibra, for example, and you say, I really want you to use all my metadata, all my tags from Calibra instead of yours, fine, right? We can take that, but then we generate the active metadata, we do the recommendations, we can then do the data prep, and then you can say, well, I really don't like your data virtualization because I have Starburst. Great, we can integrate and use Starburst. So the cool thing about Promethium is, yes, we offer a full integrated end-to-end suite, so you can get a great customer experience to start off with, but we never force people to use everything that we do. In fact, for almost every one of our solutions, our customers, they still continue to use Tableau, Power BI for the visual confirmation aspect of the product, and that's cool. They'll still use us in the beginning to do a quick and dirty analysis and say, okay, does this kind of look right? Okay, it looks right. Now I'm going to use Tableau and Power BI to consume, right? So it is flexible to allow you to do that.
I see another question over here. Yeah.
It can't be a hard one, man.
I'm trying hard, yeah, not to make it too hard. No, Sebastian Klaptor, former CDO, and now just about to start my own independent consulting business. And hey, my question would be to you, if I understood you correctly, this is the main use case is to really streamline the creation of data products, make that way faster for the data teams that handle these products. How far do you think are you away from creating data products automatically, fully automatically in real time for users, where there is just no data team? And is this super far away, or are you getting close?
Yeah, it's actually not that far away. In one of the very, very early versions of the product, we had that, and I couldn't sell any of it because the data teams hated me. Well, I mean, and for good reason, right? No one trusted it, right? So in the first iteration, when we released it, it was like, plug it in, boom, here's all the different data products, here's all the different insights, and nobody trusted us because they're like, unless I can see how it was actually built and so forth, I'm not going to trust you, right? Now, we've come a long way. ChatGPT doesn't tell you how it does it, and somehow we still trust some of the things it does. So I think a lot of it has to do with kind of the market acceptance. The capabilities, though, are not that far away, right? I think the capabilities have only gotten better, and we've already built in the explainability, which people always like to trust and say, okay, this is how you did it. I kind of disagree, but I know how you did it, so I know how to go and change it. And that's the other thing is we do allow the editability in real time, right? As opposed to some of them is like, boom, here's 200 lines of SQL. Have at it, right? It makes it kind of tough. So we do give a very nice no-code interface, like, well, here's how we did it. Here's where you can actually change stuff if you like it, right? But I would love it if we move to a world where that's possible, because that was something we had earlier on. So I'd love it if the market is ready for that.
Right. Hi, Kaycee. One question here.
Yes.
So extending on that question. Shravan Kasarla, Chief Data Officer recently with Thrivent. So my question is on extending your data fabric to really a marketplace where not only that you're enabling access, but can I publish and then actually utilize this interface? So that's the question to see it becomes a true marketplace.
Yes. Yes. So we actually do have a marketplace capability. So we're big on data sharing, right? And so there's 3 ways you can actually share data in Promethium. One is what we call Data Explorer, and that's probably more for the technical folks who they don't care if there's raw, unfinished stuff, they just want to get access to it. There's a second page called Answers, and that has all your enterprise role-based and fine-grained access control already pre-built in. So that means if I'm in finance and I go into the same page as someone in marketing, we're going to see different things. We're not going to be able to access the same thing. And then the third is a marketplace where you see all the assets listed, and you can search and find all the assets, but you only have metadata access until you request to check it out, right? So there's a governance layer for someone to approve the checkout, and then okay, this is someone who approved it, and based upon the usage tracking as well as the search statistics, we can say, hey, this has been asked, 300 times this month. It's been queried 3,000 times. We can promote it. And that way, when people come into the marketplace, they can say, hey, check this out. This has been really, really popular. So that's how we can do the data sharing within our platform. We can also integrate with other data sharing platforms as well and kind of publish the data products over to them.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Kaycee. That was a really cool demo, a cool presentation. So
the demo's even cooler if you have time.
All right.
Stop by the booth.
So I'm Oliver Wise. I'm the Chief Data Officer at the Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce has a lot of public data. We have the NOAA, which is the Weather Service, and the Census Bureau is at Department of Commerce. So we're really interested in how we publish data. So that private entities can best integrate our data into their workflows.
Yes.
So I have 2 questions. One question is, do you have customers who are trying to solve this problem of scaling NLP interfaces to data and then have to bring in independent sources like from the government into their workflows, and how do you solve that? And two, if you do have recommendations to government, we'd love to hear it. And actually, we have an active RFI out there to get that input.
Awesome.
The second question is, how do you solve what we think, or what we're encountering is like the really hard problem is the fit for purpose problem. Like if there's 3 different employment numbers across US government, right? There's because not every government source has access to IRS data. So how do you figure out like
Which
that
one?
answers are fit to purpose? Like it's one thing to get to get us to the LLM is executing an appropriate query and finding the right data and it's the right query, but like how do you ensure that that answer is fit to purpose for the whoever's asking the question?
Okay, good question. So the first part of your question, right, is integrating with third-party data, right? So we do have like APIs to be able to connect to third-party data. We do have customers, for example, where they'll take some of their internal data and create data products with some third-party data, public data like weather, for example, or national government. And then they want to actually publish those data products to an external marketplace because they have third-party agencies that want to consume it. So that is actually a use case we're working on with, one is a large government entity in the UK and another is a large insurance company here in the States. And so the reason why the approach is so attractive is because unlike other, say, data sharing platforms, we're not copying or we're not creating a physical duplicate of the data in the marketplace. And that's important because what they were afraid of is, well, if 5,000 people come and download it and make their changes unbeknownst to us and later on complain that there is a data quality or an accuracy issue, what do we do, right? So having a single virtual copy that you can consume, right, allows you one place from a governance and control perspective. So that is definitely a use case we've seen. The second one that you asked is, hey, certain things like account ID, employment ID, like how do you make sure you're picking the right one that's relevant for the use case based upon the semantics, the domain, et cetera, right? So there's a couple ways that we address that. One is we can actually understand who's asking, and based on that person's role, only give them outputs from a select source of data that's relevant to that person. Or, so for example, finance or marketing, HR, don't give them other domains, right, that you can actually isolate. So the isolation, number one, actually improves performance because there's less to go through, but 2, actually improves accuracy. 2 is you can actually incorporate like an information model. So for example, customer, the notion of customer it's not one table, it's not one column. It could be, well, customer is defined as name, SSN, birth date, address. It could be 4 tables and 8 columns across 4 tables. But I want to just say customer. We can map, it's kind of like an ontology, right? So you can actually preload existing ontologies that's relevant for your organization. We do a live mapping back to the data that you have. So when people search using these specific ontological terms, we'll do the automatic routing and mapping to the actual data that's relevant for that. And 3 is it's kind of like Google Maps when you ask how do I get from Cambridge to Somerville, you might get 3 different options. You can take the train, it'll take this long. You can bike, it'll take this long. You can take a car. We do the same thing when we give the recommendations, right? Based on what we see, I think you could take this table. I think you can use this data set, but we're going to give you 3 or 4 options first, and we'll give you the explainability of all 3 or 4 options, why we came up with it. You pick. As you pick, you're now interacting and you're now training the system, right? So what we find is, well, every time someone asks for this question, people keep picking option 3. Nobody picks 1 or 2. Then the next time someone asks, we're going to move option 3 up to option 1, or maybe we even get rid of option 1 and 2, right? So that's how over time, if it's not accurate the first time, over time, the usage will then drive that accuracy.
Thank you. We have time for one question if anyone has one. Okay.
It can be a hard one now, since this is the last one.
Oh, there is a question. Okay.
Damn it.
Trip over that thing again.
Hi, my name is Dan, founder of QGrid Data Observability Platform. How do you rationalize with other data fabrics being offered, say by Azure and so on, right? Like, how does this sort of fit in that ecosystem?
Yep, all right. So his question is like, how do we rationalize or compare with other data fabrics out there? The most important thing is knowing what the data fabric is for. So unfortunately, a lot of data fabric is a very popular term, right? If you actually try to buy an SEO on data fabric, and believe me, I know, it's a very expensive term because it's a very popular term. And so what you have in that phenomenon is that a lot of people might define it a little bit differently. And that's okay, right? I like to say different data fabrics might have different purposes, right? So for example, some data fabric is really around the consolidation of data, so that way the coordination of storage and compute is done on one layer. That would be like the Azure Data Fabric. That would be like IBM. Some is really kind of a new data platform, right? It's a new data lake with some discovery metadata capabilities like Cloudera, for example, or HP Esmeralda, right? So with Promethium, our fabric is really focused on how do you make creation of data products as easy as possible and as quickly as possible, right? I always tell people that if that's not your primary goal, right, we may not be the right fabric for you. I don't want to get up here and say like, they're all not fabrics. We're the only. I don't want to do that, right? Everyone's free to say that, but I think you have to look at what the purpose of your data fabric is, right? And also you then have to think about what are the implementation details that matter to you. So for example, with Azure, what if most of your data is not on Azure? What if someone's on-prem? What if someone's on AWS? Makes it kind of tough to use Azure Data Fabric, right? Could you move everything over into one lake? If you can, great. If you can't or don't want to, kind of tough to get that Azure Data Fabric going, right? So I think those are some of the next level implementation details that then you need to think about. And then third is like, who is it for? There's some data fabrics that the end user is the data engineer, and that's cool. Some where the end user is the governance team, right? So you have to think about like, who am I doing this for? If I put this in, is it for business people, or is it going to be a collaboration platform where the data engineer can get a specific set of value that's different from the governance user, that's different from the business analyst, but they can all collaborate together, right? So that's kind of how we see the data fabric landscape is really based upon use case, implementation detail, and the persona.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Kaycee. That concludes our session. If you like this session, please leave us feedback. If you think of any questions after you leave here, we'll monitor for the next couple of days. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Again, my
Thank you,
investor's
guys.
back there, so leave good feedback, all right? Thank you.
Yes.